My name's Adam Clark, 41 years old, father of one, husband to Melissa for nearly 17 years. We lived in Eugene, Oregon, a modest two-story home with gray shutters and a porch swing Melissa swore she'd repaint every spring but never did. Our daughter, Ellie, was 14, brilliant and stubborn, a lot like her mom. I worked remote in IT support for a logistics firm in Portland. Boring work but stable. Reliable. Melissa ran an online interior decor business from home. At least, that's what I thought she was doing. That Tuesday morning started like most others. Coffee at 6:30, silent breakfast, the occasional, "Do you need anything from a store?" tossed across the kitchen island like a spare napkin. Our marriage had become more functional than romantic, but I figured that was just part of being together for almost 2 decades. Passion fades, stability remains. That's what people say, right? Ellie was already out the door for early band practice when I stepped outside to check the mailbox. I almost didn't notice the cream-colored envelope. It was tucked behind a coupon booklet and a dental appointment reminder. But something about it made me pause. No return address. Just Melissa Clark in neat, tight handwriting. The ink looked fresh. I went back inside, dropped the rest of the mail on the counter, and held the envelope out to her. "Looks like a personal letter." She looked up from her laptop, froze for a second too long, then took it without a word. No thanks. No comment. Just a slow blink, and then straight into her purse. Odd. I didn't think much more about it until later that night, when I passed her home office and saw her typing furiously, earbuds in, her face pale under the blue light of her screen. The same envelope sat next to her mouse pad, now opened and partially tucked under a notepad. Curiosity gnawed at me. It wasn't until 2 nights later, when she went out for drinks with Jen and left her laptop open, that I saw the name again. Daniel Whitaker. It hit me like a slap. Daniel wasn't just some old friend. He was the man Melissa almost married. Her college boyfriend. The one she never talked about after we got together. And not just because he was a chapter she'd closed, but because I once found old messages between them, back in our 2nd year of marriage, and she'd sworn it was nothing. Just closure, she had said. So why was he writing again? Why now? I searched her inbox. There were dozens of messages. Weeks worth. Messages that read like echoes from a different life. Sometimes I wonder how things would have turned out if we hadn't made the choices we did. You ever feel like you're living someone else's life? I don't think I ever really stopped loving you. And worse, I'll be in Portland next weekend. 1 hour. Just to see your eyes again. My hands were shaking. I logged out, closed the screen, and sat in the dark for a long, long time. The next morning, she was humming in the kitchen. Humming. Like nothing in the world had changed. She asked if I wanted pancakes. I said no. I looked at her across the table. Her hair still damp from the shower. Her wedding ring still shining. Her smile casual. And I started to wonder, had it always been this way? Was I always the second choice? Was I just the man she settled for when Daniel moved on? Or worse, was he back? That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I replayed every late return home, every out-of-town conference, every time she flinched when I touched her. Had I missed the signs? Was I so desperate to believe we were okay that I ignored the truth? The next morning, I made a quiet decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I was going to find Daniel Whitaker, and I was going to get the truth from him, even if it tore my world apart. 3 days later, I told Melissa I had to drive up to Portland for a last-minute office meeting. She didn't blink, just asked if I'd be back in time for Ellie's school recital on Saturday. I nodded. She kissed my cheek like it meant nothing. Maybe it didn't. But to me, everything was unraveling. I didn't tell her that I wasn't meeting a client. I was meeting a ghost, Daniel Whitaker. After a little digging through the emails she'd forgotten to delete and a LinkedIn search, I found him. He was the regional manager of some eco-consulting firm downtown. Married, apparently. 2 kids. He looked older than the last photo I saw of him, of course. Grayer at the temples. But that same smug tilt in his smile remained. I emailed him anonymously. Said I had a business opportunity to discuss and asked for 15 minutes over coffee. He agreed. Tuesday, noon. A cafe near his office. I arrived early. Sat in the corner. Heart thudding. Hands cold. He walked in at 11:58 sharp. I recognized him immediately. He didn't recognize me. He ordered a black coffee, sat down, looked around casually. That same practice charm I used to imagine when Melissa talked about him back in the early years of our marriage. I leaned forward. "Daniel," I said, "it's not a business meeting. My name's Adam Clark, Melissa's husband." He froze, hand still on the cup. I thought he might walk out, but he didn't. He exhaled. Slowly. "I figured this might happen eventually," he said. That stopped me. "What does that mean?" He shrugged. "She said you might find out." Said, as in they knew this was a risk, and kept going anyway. I swallowed hard. "How long has this been going on?" He met my eyes. "Define this." I leaned closer. "Don't play games with me." "I'm not." "Look, Adam, it's not what you think." I laughed. It was dry, bitter. "What I think is that you've been emailing my wife, talking about meeting her, reminiscing about old feelings behind my back. Am I missing something?" He set his cup down and rubbed his temples. "Melissa and we've had contact for about 4 months. It started after we ran into each other at a real estate seminar." "A seminar?" He continued. "We didn't plan it. It just happened. We talked, caught up. One thing led to another." I interrupted. "Are you sleeping with her?" He didn't answer. That was enough. I sat back, my throat tight. "She said she was bored," he added. "Said she felt invisible in her own house. That you'd stopped seeing her." My jaw clenched. "She told you that?" "She said she was just existing. That you were a good man, but predictable. Safe. That she missed feeling wanted." Those words cut deeper than any confession. "I've given her everything," I said, my voice low. "Everything." "I don't doubt that," he said. "But love isn't always about effort, is it?" I stood up. He didn't try to stop me. But just as I turned to leave, he said something that froze my blood. "Did she ever tell you about Ellie?" I slowly turned back. "What about Ellie?" He shook his head, like he regretted saying anything. "Forget it." "No," I said. "Say it." Daniel stood, picked up his coffee, tossed the rest in the trash. "Check the timeline, Adam. Do the math. She and we weren't quite done when you two started dating." The room tilted for a second. "She's your daughter," I said, almost whispering. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I drove back to the motel and sat on the bed for hours. Didn't even take off my jacket. Just stared at the ceiling. My heart was pounding, my breath shallow. 1,000 moments with Ellie flashed through my mind. Her laugh, her birthday parties, the time I taught her how to ride a bike, the way she'd cry when she was little and say, "Daddy," makes the monsters go away. She's my daughter, no matter what. But the possibility, the mere shadow of it, shattered something in me. When I came home the next night, Melissa greeted me with a smile. "How was the meeting?" she asked. "Eye-opening," I said. She didn't press. I watched her as she washed dishes, talked about new design clients, made plans for the weekend. And all I could see were the lies behind her eyes. But I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Not without proof. I needed clarity. Truth. And I needed a DNA test. I waited until the house was quiet. Melissa asleep, her breathing shallow, steady, the same way it always was when she slipped into that deep, undisturbed kind of sleep that made me wonder what piece she knew that I didn't. Ellie was in her room with headphones on, watching some drama series she always tried to explain to me. I knocked softly. When she looked up, I smiled. "Hey, Elle, you got a minute?" She paused her show. "What's up, Dad? Just need a favor." "Kinda weird." "You game?" She grinned. "That depends. Are you about to make me dig a hole in the backyard or something?" I laughed. God, she was sharp. Nothing criminal. Just science. I held up the 2 DNA swab kits I'd picked up that day from a pharmacy an hour away. Her eyes narrowed. "Wait, is this one of those ancestry things?" "Something like that," I said. I didn't tell her the truth. I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to be sure. Not just for me. For her too. So we swabbed. Laughed a little at how awkward it was. I told her it was for a genealogy surprise, and she bought it barely. The samples went out the next morning. Express. And then I waited. Waiting for those results felt like standing on a cliff during a windstorm, knowing the ground was about to shift beneath your feet, but not knowing which direction you'd fall. The days that followed weren't kind. Melissa started acting off. Not paranoid exactly, just restless, irritable. She'd check her phone constantly, step out to take calls that she said were clients, but I'd hear her voice drop into something softer than business. She was being careful, smarter than I'd expected. The emails had stopped. No new messages. No new mistakes. She was covering her tracks. But that made me wonder, had she done this before? One evening, I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through old photo albums. Her eyes looked glassy, distant. "Hey," I said. She looked up, startled. "Didn't hear you come in. You okay?" She smiled tightly. "Just reminiscing." "About what?" She closed the album. "Nothing important." But I saw the photo on top. Ellie at 2 years old, sitting in a sandbox covered in mud. Melissa beside her. And, standing behind them, was a man I didn't recognize. I frowned. "Who's that?" She looked down. "Just someone from the park." She closed the album too quickly. I didn't press. But something was wrong. That wasn't someone from the park. That was someone she knew deeply. And he had the same nose as Ellie. That weekend, I took Ellie out for pancakes. A daddy-daughter tradition we'd somehow managed to keep. She watched me carefully across the table. "Is this one of those bonding talks where you say I'm growing up too fast?" I smiled. "No, just wanted to see you smile." She raised an eyebrow. "Okay, now I know something's up. You ever feel like people aren't who they say they are?" I asked carefully. She shrugged. "Like actors?" "No, like people you know, people close to you." She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Sometimes I think Mom's sad." But she never says it. Sad how? I don't know. Like she's always waiting for something that never happens. That hit harder than I expected. 5 days later, the DNA results came. I opened the email in the garage, engine running, music low, hands shaking. The words stared back at me like a knife. Paternity probability, 0%. 0. Not even a shadow of doubt. Ellie wasn't biologically mine. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just stared. And then I thought about her first words. Her first lost tooth. The time she broke her arm falling off the swing set and asked if I could stay at the hospital all night, even though Melissa wanted to go home. She's mine. She may not share my blood, but she's my daughter. Still, the betrayal sliced through everything I believed we were. Everything Melissa told me we were. I didn't go inside that night. I drove. Nowhere in particular. Just out past the city limits, to a roadside diner where no one knew me. I sat in a booth with cold coffee and a notebook. And for the first time, I started writing down everything. Dates, emails, conversations, that photo album. I was going to build a timeline. A case. Because if Melissa had lied about Ellie, what else was she hiding? The next day, I made a call. To someone I never thought I'd speak to again. My mother. She and Melissa hadn't spoken in years. Not since a fight over boundaries and babysitting gone wrong. But my mom had always been sharp. Observant. The kind of woman who notices patterns others ignore. When I told her what I'd learned, there was a pause on the line. Then she said, "Adam, I wanted to tell you years ago." "Tell me what?" "Melissa and I, during her first year of marriage, I caught her crying on a back porch. She said something I never forgot." "What?" She said, "He thinks I'm starting fresh. But the past always finds its way back in." I closed my eyes. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you were happy. Or you thought you were. And because she swore it meant nothing. But now it meant everything. And I was done waiting. It was time to confront Melissa. But not with rage. With proof. And a plan. I planned the dinner like a chess move. Every plate, every chair, every word ahead of time. I told Melissa it was a small celebration. Ellie got an A on her biology exam and had just landed first chair at her band. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the reason. I invited my mom, and I invited someone else. The man from the photo in the album. It took some digging to find him. His name was Reed Maddox. Not Daniel. Someone else entirely. A name I'd never heard spoken in our house. But his face, it was undeniable. And the closer I looked at it, the more I saw Ellie's cheekbones. Her dimples. Reed was a real estate broker now. Still in Eugene. Still with that same sharp, slightly smug look in his eyes. It took one call from a private buyer interested in a large out-of-town property to get him to show up. The plan was simple. I'd serve dinner. Then I'd serve the truth. That evening, I set the table myself. Ellie helped with the drinks. Melissa asked me 3 times why I looked so put together. I smiled. Just proud of her girl tonight. She leaned in and kissed my cheek. And I almost flinched. At 6:45 sharp, the doorbell rang. Melissa called out, "Mom's early?" I opened the door. My mother stood there in her usual calm posture, lips pressed thin but polite. She carried a pie she didn't bake, just store-bought, still in the plastic shell. That told me she knew tonight wasn't about dessert. At 6:59, the second knock came. Melissa was pouring wine. "I got it," I said. And there he was, Reed, wearing a navy blazer, slightly confused. "Mr. Clark?" "Yes," I said. "Right on time." He stepped in. Melissa turned from the kitchen, saw him, and froze. I mean completely. Her hands tightened around the wine bottle like she didn't know whether to pour it or smash it. "Adam," she said slowly, "what's going on?" Ellie looked from one face to another. "Mom? Who is that?" Melissa was pale, her voice barely a whisper. "Reed." My mother stepped to the side, eyes narrowed. She was already reading the whole script in real time. Reed gave a small smile. "Good to see you again, Mel." Mel. No one called her that. Not anyone in the last 17 years. Except him. We sat down. The food barely touched. Melissa's hands trembled slightly as she tried to serve pasta. Reed made small talk. He was good at that. But his eyes kept flicking to Ellie, and hers to him. It didn't take long before Ellie spoke. "Why are we acting like this isn't weird?" Melissa tried to smile. "Honey, we're just—" "No," I said. "You're right, Elle. This is weird, but you deserve to know the truth." Melissa stood suddenly. "Adam, don't sit," I said. "You don't get to hide anymore." She hesitated, then sat slowly, eyes glassy, lips trembling. I pulled out the envelope, the DNA results, laid them on the table. Melissa's eyes flicked down. She knew. "Ellie," I said, turning to her, my voice low and steady, "I took a DNA test. With you. I didn't want to. I didn't want to doubt. But the results came back." Her eyes widened. "Wait. What?" I nodded. "You're not my biological daughter." She blinked. Hard. Melissa tried to speak. "Adam, not now." Ellie's voice cracked. "Are you saying?" "No," I said, reaching across the table, grabbing her hand. "You are my daughter in every way that counts. But biologically? No." And I had to find out who was. I looked at Reed, then back at Melissa. It was him, wasn't it? Melissa let out a breath she'd been holding. "I didn't know for sure," she whispered. I slammed my fist on the table. The plates jumped. "Don't lie again." "Not now." "You knew." Tears slid down her cheeks. "Yes." Reed leaned back, shock washing over him. He hadn't known. Until now. Ellie stood up. "So all this time, you lied to me." Melissa tried to reach her. "Sweetheart, Don't." Ellie snapped. Her voice had never been louder. "All those times you said honesty matters most? That secrets are poison? You lied for 14 years. I didn't want to lose you." Melissa sobbed. "You didn't want to lose yourself," I said coldly. The room fell into a heavy silence. Even my mother, quiet until now, finally spoke. "You told me once the past would find its way back. You were right. But don't pretend like this wasn't a choice." Melissa turned to me, pleading. "Adam, I was scared. You were good to me. Reed he wasn't ready. I thought I could bury it and move on." I stared at her. "You didn't bury it. You just waited for it to rot." The dinner was over. Ellie went to her room, slammed the door. My mother left without a word. Reed stood awkwardly in the doorway. "I didn't know," he said again. I nodded. "You want to talk to her eventually," I said. "But not tonight." He left. Melissa sat on the couch, face in her hands, shaking. And I stood there, watching the wreckage she built collapse around her. That night, I slept in Ellie's room, on the floor. She didn't speak, but when I woke up the next morning, there was a blanket draped over me, and a glass of water on the nightstand. The house felt like a museum after that night, full of things we used to love, but hollow, untouched. Ellie avoided her mother entirely. Meals were taken in silence or skipped altogether. Melissa, once obsessive about home routines, now drifted like a ghost through the rooms. She didn't yell, didn't explain. She simply existed. I started sleeping in the guest room. It was easier that way. For all of us. I'd begun researching lawyers. Quietly. I didn't want to destroy Melissa. But I couldn't live like this either. Not after the lies. Not after what she stole from me, from Ellie. I didn't need revenge. I needed clarity. Distance. Ellie was mine. I knew that in my soul. But Melissa? Melissa had become a stranger with my last name. One night, I found her sitting on the porch steps. She was in one of my old sweatshirts, holding a photo of Ellie as a baby. "Do you hate me?" she asked. I didn't answer, because I didn't know. She sniffed. "You're not even yelling. That's what makes it worse. You're not angry. You're gone." I looked out toward the street. "You buried the truth for 14 years, then built a family on top of it like it wouldn't crack." "I loved you," she whispered. "Still do." I turned. "Did you love me when you were writing to Daniel behind my back?" She blinked. That was different." "Ow!" She stood. "Because he reminded me of who I used to be, before I became this." She motioned around. "The mom, the wife, the woman who had to forget herself to keep everything together." "You didn't forget yourself," I said. "You just forgot who you promised to be." She sat back down and looked at the sky. "I never wanted to lie about Ellie. But when I found out I was pregnant, Reed was gone. He ghosted. You were there. Kind. Steady. And I fell in love with you." I didn't say anything, because part of me believed her, and part of me wanted to burn the house down. That week, I met with a lawyer. I didn't file. Not yet. But I asked questions. About custody, property, stability. She told me I was being calm, that it would serve me well. I wasn't calm. I was just running out of feelings to express. Then Melissa dropped her bomb. We were sitting in the kitchen, the air between us thick and stale. "I'm pregnant." My heart stopped. "What?" She set a stick on the counter. "Positive. Clear as day." "I took 4 of them," she said, voice flat. "I was going to tell you, but then everything happened." My mouth went dry. "Is it mine?" She looked up, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes. This time I swear to you, it is. I haven't seen Reed. Not since college. And I haven't touched Daniel since before he emailed me." I backed away, stunned. "I don't even know if I can believe that." "I know," she said. "I wouldn't either." That night, I drove to a motel, sat on the edge of the bed, and cried. Not because of the betrayal, but because I realized something I never thought I'd admit. I didn't want her to be carrying my child anymore. Not like this. Not in the ruins. The next morning, Ellie knocked on the motel door. I hadn't told her I was there, but she found me anyway. She walked in and sat on the edge of the bed. "You're leaving, aren't you?" she asked. I nodded. "Not from you. Never from you. But yeah, from her." Ellie looked down. She told me about the baby. I waited. Then she said, "I don't want another sibling." I didn't respond, because I didn't want one either. That weekend, I told Melissa I was moving out. I'd still be close. Still see Ellie every week. But I couldn't keep pretending. She cried, begged, swore this was her wake-up call. But I didn't respond. I just packed 2 bags. And as I walked out, she said something that stopped me. "You know the photo you found? Of me, Ellie, and Reed?" I turned slowly. That was the day I realized Reed wasn't capable of love. He took the photo, then left us there at the park. Told me he wasn't ready. I sat on that bench with Ellie for 3 hours, waiting for him to come back. I stared at her. "And you still let me believe she was mine?" She nodded. "Because in my heart, you were her father. You were her father." I walked out, not because I didn't care, but because I finally realized she didn't deserve my silence anymore. She didn't deserve the peace I'd given her for years. And whatever came next will be on my terms. 1 year. That's how long it took to feel human again. I found a small rental home 20 minutes from our old neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just clean, quiet, and mine. I furnished it with things I chose, not things we argued about. I cooked dinners for 1 or 2, not out of sadness, but peace. Ellie spent every other weekend with me, and some school nights too. She stopped calling it visiting, started calling it Dad's house. That meant more than any court order ever could. We talked openly now, about Melissa, about Reed, about the baby, about pain, forgiveness, the strange way time stretches when you're healing. She didn't say much at first, but she started to call out lies when she saw them. At school, in movies, and people. That scared me and made me proud at the same time. Melissa gave birth to a boy 6 months after I left. She named him Caleb. She didn't ask me to be at the hospital. She didn't have to. I hadn't seen her in person since I moved out, until she showed up at my door. It was a gray Thursday in early October. I was making tea. The knock was soft, like she already regretted it. I opened the door. She looked tired, thinner. Her eyes had lost the shine they once carried when she was scheming something. She wore a coat that didn't quite fit, and in her arms was a baby, round face, wide eyes. "Caleb, can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. We sat in silence for a long time. I didn't offer tea. She didn't ask. Finally, she spoke. "I'm losing the house." I said nothing. I made a mistake, financially. Trusted the wrong people. Got advice from Reed, of all people. Her voice broke. I thought I could fix everything. But now I'm drowning. I didn't know where else to go. I waited. I needed her to say it. "I'm sorry." "For what?" I asked. She looked down at the baby. "For everything. For lying. For dragging you into my chaos. For using your love as a safety net." I nodded. "And what do you want from me?" She swallowed. "Help. Not money. Just direction. You always knew how to fix things. I don't even know where to start anymore." I looked at Caleb. He stared up at me with big brown eyes. He wasn't mine. Not by blood. Not by name. But he would grow up in this mess if someone didn't set a boundary. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "I'll connect you with someone, an attorney who can help with restructuring the debt. I'll get Ellie a counselor again. And I'll help make sure she and Caleb don't suffer because of your mistakes." Melissa started to cry. "Thank you, but I won't come back," I added. "Not as your husband. Not as your safety." She nodded, tears running freely. "I know. I just needed to hear your voice say it." As she stood to leave, she paused by the door. "Do you hate me?" she asked again, just like she did on the porch a year earlier. I looked her straight in the eye. "No," I said, "but I don't love you either." Her breath caught, and I could tell that was the blow she hadn't prepared for. Later that night, Ellie came over. I told her mom had stopped by. She nodded. "Did she ask for anything?" she asked. "Not what you think," I said. She smiled faintly. "She always wants something." I didn't respond. She looked at me. "Do you miss her?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "I miss the version of her I thought was real. But that version never existed." Ellie leaned against me on the couch. "You're the only real parent I've got," she said quietly. I swallowed hard. "I know." 2 months later, I sat in a courtroom. Melissa had filed for bankruptcy. The house was gone. Caleb was placed with temporary guardians while she entered a court-ordered rehab program for mental health treatment. She'd spiraled harder than I expected. Turns out Daniel had resurfaced, then disappeared. Again, Ellie chose to stay with me full-time. That day, as we left the building, Melissa looked at us from across the parking lot. Thin, broken, still crying. But this time, she didn't chase us. She just watched. I didn't wave, but Ellie did. Just once. Then she got into the car, and we drove home. It's been another year since then. Caleb's with us some weekends now. Melissa has a job at a small furniture store. Nothing glamorous, but stable. She's learning. And me? I'm not angry anymore. I see her at pickups sometimes. We nod. That's all. Ellie's applying to college. Says she wants to study psychology. To understand people who hurt others and don't know why. I told her that was brave. And she said, "So were you, Dad. You didn't blow up. You just survived better." I didn't seek revenge. I chose truth. And I left it behind like a scar she could never hide from. That was the real payback.